Welcome to Czechoslovakia. In today's video, we're going back in time to a world that no longer exists. Television was everywhere in Czechoslovakia, but freedom was not. There were 2 channels, hundreds of programs, and every frame carefully watched, every script approved, and every story controlled. In this video, we're going to take a look at Czechoslovak TV. We'll explore the shows, the stars, and the politics behind TV in Czechoslovakia. From fairy tales to propaganda, from laughter to control, from some awesome programming to some truly bizarre. This is the incredible story of a country told through its TV screen. This is television in Czechoslovakia. So firstly, a brief history on Czechoslovakia while the communists do a big parade. I'll tell you what, communists live for a parade. So Czechoslovakia began in 1918 as a rare democracy in Central Europe. There was free press, free elections, and real pluralism. But this freedom was fragile. In 1938, Nazi Germany tore the country apart. Political parties were banned, resistance was hunted, and daily life meant fear, rationing, and silence. After the war came new hope. But in 1948, the communists seized power. Overnight, Czechoslovakia became a Soviet state. Daily life was shaped by political control. Newspapers printed only the party line. Children were taught Marxism at school, workers' unions became tools of the regime, and secret police watched everyone. A wrong word at work, a banned book at home, even a joke in a pub, all could mean interrogation. In the 1970s and 1980s, life was stable but stifling. Shops were half empty, careers depended on loyalty, and culture was scrubbed clean of any dissent. Most people learned to keep 2 faces, one for the public and one at home. But then, in 1989, the silence broke. The Velvet Revolution filled the streets with voices the regime could no longer control, and within weeks the dictatorship collapsed, and Czechoslovakia was free once more. But the history of Czechoslovakia was about to end, because fundamental differences between the Czech and the Slovaks could no longer be contained, and the country was peacefully dissolved into 2 new states. It was called the Velvet Divorce, a rare case where a country ended not with gunfire or bloodshed, but with signatures on paper, and a quiet turning of the page in history that meant Czechoslovakia was no more. You're listening to the national anthem of the USSR at the moment, which I think is probably the best national anthem ever composed. Now, TV arrived in Czechoslovakia in the 1950s, with just one state-run channel, CST, with a second channel then arriving in 1967. But throughout its history, TV was controlled by the Communist Party. So, if you've ever wondered what it was like to watch TV in a communist nation, well, let's do it now. So, early programming in Czechoslovakia was mostly limited to news and cultural broadcasts, and this was the main news show, Televizní noviny, translated as, you guessed it, TV news. Launched in 1958, Televizní noviny quickly became more than just a program. It was the voice of authority, the official lens through which people were meant to see their country and the wider world. But of course, the images on screen were never neutral. From the beginning, every script, every story, every clip of Televizní noviny was tightly controlled by the Communist Party. Editors and journalists worked under strict instructions. They were to highlight socialist achievements, glorify the party, report faithfully on Soviet successes, and never, ever give space to dissent. Let's take a look at a later clip from the 1970s.
Ještě jednou vám přeji dobrý večer.
So, in this clip from 1973, she is telling viewers about the positive results of the Communist Party's economic policies and the participation of citizens in activities organised by the government. The report also mentions the support of the Communist Party for the Soviet Union and reports on the condemnation of the United States by the South Vietnamese government. Her whole report serves to reinforce the legitimacy and success of the communist regime.
Jako první v Jihočeském kraji dnes zahájili jarní směny Národní fronty občané.
Let's fast forward now to Colour TV and a news report from the 1980s.
Během 100-minutového zpravodajství jsme
And on the news tonight they are, of course, praising the Communist Party, in particular the Clement Gottwald furnace in Ostrava, which they say is employing computer technology to enhance production efficiency.
O pracovním režimu vysoké pece číslo 3 v Nové huti Klementa Gottwalda.
They're telling viewers that the Communist Party leadership is stressing the importance of applying scientific and technological advances to improve production quality and economic performance. So now you know. And in this report, they're talking about the Communist Party's ambitious 5-year plan to build new housing and urban infrastructure. In particular, this settlement in Česká Lípa is highlighted as a successful example of the construction efforts, where a collective of 90 builders have collaborated to deliver thousands of new homes. And check out these Czech apartments.
Kuchyň je prostornější, vejde se do ní i jídelní kout. Dětský pokoj má 2 vstupy.
It reminds me of my nan's house. So, through the 1970s and 80s, Televize Nationalization continued as the trusted face of official propaganda. It constantly showed new factories, smiling workers, parades and party congresses. Abroad, it showed a world in crisis, capitalist countries collapsing under crime, racism and poverty, while socialism marched proudly forward. Yet, of course, behind the certainty of the anchor's voice, many viewers knew there was another story, one that the TV news would never show. For decades, Televize Nationalization was both omnipresent and mistrusted, a nightly reminder of the state's power over information. Anyway, that's enough of the serious stuff. Let's tune in to something a bit lighter.
Kvůli svý loupežnický cti.
So one of the most popular and fondly remembered features on Czechoslovak TV was Večerníček, which translates as the evening time, and this was a nightly slot of iconic children's TV shows. It was the nightly bedtime story slot, where millions of kids would gather round to watch their favourite shows before bed. And Czechoslovakia had so many amazing kids shows, like this one.
Takhle by k zámku nedošel. Povídá si Rumcajs.
So this show is called About the Robber Rumcajs, and this was one of the most popular kids shows of the time. It tells the story of Rumcaj, a shoemaker turned outlaw who lives in a forest with his wife Manka and their son Sispasek. Now, Rumcaj wasn't a typical bandit. He robbed the arrogant and the powerful, especially greedy nobles and pompous soldiers, while protecting ordinary folk. I love how colourful this show is, and it has brilliant humour. The stories kind of feel like fairy tales, but they also carry a quiet message about resisting unfair authority. I guess in many ways this is the Czechoslovak Robin Hood.
A tak v té jičínské hladomorně se najednou octl sám pan Kvído knížepák.
Another massively iconic show was this one. This is Spable and Hyvinek, and they are a famous Czech puppet duo who were created in the early 1920s. Now, Spable is the bald, bumbling father figure with big ears, and Hyvinek is his mischievous, sharp-tongued son, and they became national favourites through puppet theatre, radio records, and later on TV.
Prosím tebe, Máni, nehoukej na mě. Žeriku, pomoct.
No, kde to vázne? Takhle toho moc neuděláme. Kdopak tady neplní své úkoly?
So the humour on this show worked on two levels. While children would laugh at the slapstick antics, adults would catch on to the clever wordplay, satire, and sly jokes about everyday life under authority. Now, because this was a kids' show and because of the double meaning, these jokes would often slip past the censors. After all, who was paying any attention to a kids' show?
Tati, není ti nic? Pojď sem. No, dávej pozor.
So this show was huge, not just in Czechoslovakia, but across Eastern Europe. And what made it unique was the ability of the show to reflect ordinary life. While the two puppets often get entangled in absurd situations that mirrored the contradictions of the real world. Even today, there is the Spable and Hyvinek Theatre in Prague, and these puppets continue to perform their stories, making them one of the longest-running puppet traditions in Europe.
To bychom měli.
A co jako?
Zapálíme.
So honestly, while I find these puppets a little creepy, this is actually a really good show. It is massively iconic. Go to the modern day Czech Republic now and you'll still see these puppets. Don't have nightmares, kids.
No, já bych se připravil na všechno. Jeden... Taťulda, měj rozum!
Now, no video on Czech TV would be complete without a visit from these two legends. I am delighted, everybody, to introduce you to these two guys, Pat and Matt. Okay, so meet Pat and Matt. Now, these are two handymen with big ideas and even bigger disasters. So this Czech stop-motion classic was first created in the 1970s, and it follows these two lovable neighbours as they try to fix everything and, of course, make it worse. So this show is brilliant. There's no words, just pure childish slapstick, clever animation, and endless optimism. Each episode is just 8 minutes long and it involves Pat and Matt basically getting everything wrong, and I'm gonna level with you here, this show is great. So in the episode you're watching now, Pat and Matt are hired as decorators and, well, yeah, you get the idea. So Pat and Matt is probably one of the most beloved shows from Czechoslovakia, and I can completely see why. It is so much fun, and if you've never seen episodes before, please, after this video, type Pat and Matt in YouTube and go and watch them. They're just great fun. So politically, Večerníček was one of the few safe zones on Czechoslovak TV. Unlike the news or adult dramas, which we'll look at next, it rarely carried heavy-handed ideology. Instead, it offered laughter, wonder and imagination, a small escape from the grey world of the official propaganda. That's partly why it's remembered so fondly. In a state where so much was controlled, this nightly storytime felt like a gift, like an escape. And unlike many shows from the era, Večerníček survived the fall of communism. In fact, it still airs in the Czech Republic and Slovakia today, with the same little boy in the paper hat introducing the shows. For Czechs and Slovaks alike, Večerníček was more than just TV. It's a symbol of childhood, of comfort, and of stories shared by an entire nation, night after night, generation after generation.
Naposledy v životě si líznama.
From the very early 1960s, a new type of programming began to appear on Czechoslovak television, and these were so-called socialist realism dramas. This was the first one of them all, Rodina Blahova, which translates to the Blahova family. Set in post-war socialist Czechoslovakia, this show portrayed themes of hard work, family values, and optimism about the new socialist society. Each episode would deal with small domestic and workplace challenges, showing how ordinary people could live happy and decently under the socialist dream. Although simple and modest in its storylines, Rodina Blahova was in fact groundbreaking. It brought a slice of everyday life to television, using characters that viewers could recognise and relate to. It also laid the foundation for a whole genre of Czechoslovak socialist realist dramas that dominated the 1960s and beyond. Politically, this show fitted neatly with the state's goals, showing a model socialist family, loyal, industrious and content. I'll have what they're drinking. But the fact is, for many viewers, it was simply comforting and familiar. One of the first times they saw people like themselves honestly portrayed on screen.
Teď ochutnáte něco, co vyrobil sám pan Bradáč.
Odmítněte to, rychle to odmítněte.
Proslulý Bradáčů.
Following the success of Rodina Blahova came Alisha Ayarod, broadcast in 1966. And this series followed this woman, Alishka, a strong, optimistic mother raising her family through the challenges of everyday life in a socialist society. Again, it focused on ordinary people, workers, parents, neighbours, but with a bit more emotional depth and realism. Now, Alishka was portrayed not just as a loyal citizen, but also as a woman balancing love, work, and family responsibilities, making her one of the first multi-dimensional female characters on Czechoslovak TV. Now, nothing much really happens in each episode, and it seems to consist of Alishka mostly making tea and food for people. But I guess in its own way, this show was kinda groundbreaking. It focused on the woman's point of view, which in the 1960s was fairly unique, and she was portrayed as a strong woman, and let's be honest lads, you wouldn't mess with her. So, when Czechoslovak TV wasn't busy churning out these socialist realism dramas, they also loved music and variety. He looks like Hitman. So perhaps the most famous of all of the music shows was this one, Zlatý Slavik, which translates as the Golden Nightingale. Now, this show invited the public to vote for their favourite singers of the year, and the winners were announced in a glitzy Televize gala that became one of the biggest annual events on Czechoslovak TV. This was the X Factor or Idol series way back in the 1960s. And this was more than just a yearly award show. It was a snapshot of Czechoslovak culture and of what music people actually loved listening to. Look, don't say I don't deliver for you. This is the Czechoslovak version of What's New Pussycat. Thank me later.
Žofie včera řekla, kouknu se jednou ze všech stran a vyletím z okna jako aeroplán, jako
So this show was massive, but even this celebration of music wasn't entirely free from politics. Certain singers were banned from singing if their songs did not particularly fall in line with the state. And while the programme was entertaining, it was closely monitored by the regime. The regime used it to showcase its preferred safe stars, as opposed to anybody who had rocked the narrative too much. However, despite this control, the show remained enormously popular. It was a rare chance for glamour, excitement, and a sense of connection to the wider world on Czechoslovak TV. Now, Zátislavík lasted all the way up to the fall of communism itself. Here's another clip from the 1980s. And if you want an insight into Czechoslovak music and culture, well, this is a pretty good place to start. Go and watch the episodes on YouTube. You can see them for each year. So, as Czechoslovak TV entered the 1970s and 1980s, it was the so-called golden age of TV, as it was during this period that Czechoslovakia produced literally hundreds and hundreds of beloved shows. These shows were massively popular, and many are still watched and loved today. Now, I can't show you all the major shows because this video would be 10 hours long, but here is just a selection. Perhaps one of the most notable is this one, and I'm going to attempt the Czech, so good luck everyone. 30 Případů Majora Zemana. Okay, that translates as the 30 cases of Major Zeman. Now this series follows Jan Zeman, an officer in the Czechoslovak state security, from the end of World War II up until the early 1970s. Each episode represents a single year, and as you can see, the series was lavishly produced. It had location filming, stunts, and high-end production values which were unusual for Czechoslovak TV at the time. It basically looked like a US exciting detective show, but behind its polished surface, it was a carefully crafted piece of political storytelling. So, Major Zeman was portrayed as the ideal socialist hero. He was disciplined, loyal, and morally pure. His enemies, on the other hand, represented everything that the regime wanted viewers to fear. It consisted of Western spies, priests, political dissidents, etc., etc. Each story reinforces the message that the Communist Party and the state police were the protectors of peace and justice, while anybody opposing the regime was corrupt or treacherous. Did you see that kid just fall over? I bet that wasn't in the script. And this is one of the most infamous episodes of the show. Set in 1968, the time of the Prague Spring, Major Zeman is investigating a mysterious murder at the quiet lakeside, but the case soon reveals a deeper plot involving exiles, traitors, and Western agents, that's me folks, conspiring to undermine socialism. What begins as a crime story becomes clear propaganda. Reformers and dissenters are portrayed as enemies of the state, their actions are twisted into a criminal conspiracy, and Major Zeman, loyal and unshakable, uncovers the truth and restores order. Now, of course, Czechoslovak TV wasn't on its own in having this kind of political propaganda. You can watch American dramas of the time, and you'll probably find Russian spies as the main enemy in them. But what was remarkable about this is that every single episode was focused on how noble and good the Czechoslovak secret service is, and how we must fight Western influence.
Moment. Já si to musím tady ještě trošku zrichtovat.
The funny thing about Major Zeman is that, well, nobody really cares that much about its political propaganda because it was one of the best made crime shows ever in Czechoslovakia. So, despite the Cold War propaganda, well, who really cares? It was very entertaining. And believe me when I say that this show still airs reruns to millions of viewers even today.
To nemůžete popřít.
Now this is one of the most famous and controversial TV dramas of late socialist Czechoslovakia. This is Žena za pultem, translated as The Woman Behind the Counter. I want that cheese. So, The Woman Behind the Counter was part social realism and part political theatre, and it's a striking example of how everyday life was turned into ideological storytelling. Broadcast in 1977, the show follows Anna Holobalova, a recently divorced woman who begins working in a grocery store. Through her eyes, the show explores the lives of her co-workers and customers, their relationships, ambitions and moral choices, all within the rhythm of socialist daily life. Now, at first glance, this show looks like a warm human drama about resilience and dignity. Anna finds friendship, romance and purpose working behind that counter, becoming a quiet heroine of the working class. But beneath the gentle tone lies clear political messaging. Žena za pultem idealises the socialist workplace as a place of fairness and solidarity, where personal fulfilment and social duty are one and the same. Each episode highlights the virtues of the ordinary socialist citizen, cooperation to the state, loyalty, optimism, while contrasting them with selfishness, greed, or nostalgia for pre-socialist times.
Pozor, aby vám nezaskočil.
This series was a massive success on the screen. The lead actress's public loyalty to the Communist Party gave the show a polarising legacy. It was beloved by some and despised by others. After communism collapsed in 1989, Žena za pultem became shorthand for soft propaganda. Television that looked human and emotional, but quietly served to normalise a tightly controlled state.
Vidíte, nastoupil.
Všechno v pořádku?
Ještě tady. Všechno v pořádku.
Kdybyste něco...
We're now well into the 1980s, and so a look at a final few shows before Czechoslovakia ceases to exist. And this one is Pan Tao, translated as Mr. Tao, and this was one of Czechoslovakia's most beloved and enduring TV creations. Now, Pan Tao tells the story of a mysterious silent gentleman in a bowler hat, this guy, who can perform magic with the tap of his finger. Pan Tao never speaks in the episodes, he simply smiles, nods, and conjures up gentle miracles to help children and families solve their problems. So in this particular episode, the kids are sad because all of the snow is melting, which means they can't go sledging anymore. So what can Pan Tao do to help them?
Aber meiner ist viel schöner.
Hooray for Pan Tao. Okay, so I love this show. It's really wholesome and it's just really magical. And yeah, you can go and watch episodes of it on YouTube. Obviously, you don't have to speak Czech to understand it because there are no spoken words in the episode. And this is one of the reasons why this show became really, really popular outside Czechoslovakia. It aired all across Europe, and I'm told it was especially popular, believe it or not, in capitalist West Germany. Of all the shows I watched while making this... Oh, it's a Frenchie! I've got a Frenchie as well. Sorry. Of all the shows I watched while making this video, Pan Tao is by far my favourite. The orchestration is brilliant, the scenes of imagination are so brilliantly delivered, and, well, it's just basically great fun. And I can see why this show was such a massive hit in Czechoslovakia and across Europe, although I'm slightly upset that it never made it over to the UK.
Wer von wahren Hundefreunden zu uns kommt, bleibt Kunde, beispielhaft.
Onward with the magic, and this is Arabella. Now this show follows Arabella, who is a princess from the fairy tale kingdom who accidentally crosses into the real world through a magic bell that connects both realms. I know, stay with it. There she meets Peter, an ordinary schoolboy, and chaos ensues as the boundary between fantasy and reality collapses.
Šílenec. Přepřel se královu rozkazu.
With talking animals, flying rings and time-bending spells, Arabella is full of colour, humour and invention. Like Pantau, it's really creative and just good fun. Now, the interesting thing about Arabella is that the fairy tale kingdom was full of absurd bureaucrats, scheming villains and vain royalty. Not unlike the real-world figures that the audience knew too well. But the show's playful tone let it poke fun at power, greed and conformity without ever saying so directly. This show was again a massive hit, not just in Czechoslovakia, but across Eastern and even some parts of Western Europe.
Prosím tě, promiň Karle, víš, ale Rejža ti vzkazuje.
So, just like Czechoslovakia, this video too must come to an end. And so we're going to conclude by looking at this show, Navstevnishi, translated as The Visitors, which was one of the most ambitious and imaginative Czechoslovak TV series from the 1980s, that mixed comedy, time travel and socialist optimism in equal measure. Not quite sure what she's up to in there. Now, this series begins in the year 2484, when scientists discover that Earth is about to be struck by a comet. Dun dun dun. Now, to prevent disaster, a team of 4 time travellers is sent back to the 1980s, and they arrive in socialist Czechoslovakia.
CML.
Can we take a moment to appreciate these awesome sets and props? I absolutely love this aesthetic. So once the visitors, who are all absolutely gorgeous by the way, she is extremely pretty and he's a very handsome man, have arrived on Earth, they must try to navigate the ordinary world of milk deliveries, small apartment flats and suspicious neighbours, all while trying to blend in with 20th century life. Their futuristic gadgets constantly cause chaos, from flying cars to portable computers that confuse everyone around them.
40 minut, slunný den 21. května roku 2484. 9:00 se schází mimořádné zasedání.
Just look at these sets and production values and this awesome 80s synth music going on as well. This show is awesome.
Soustřeďte pozornost na střed obrazu. Tato rotující mlhovina zaměřená včerejšího dne ve 22 hodiny 34 minuty znamená pro naši zemi smrtelné nebezpečí.
As the episodes progress, the visitors arrive on Earth. Now, with impressive special effects, a memorable electronic soundtrack, beautiful, talented cast members, this show not only became a hit in Czechoslovakia, but again across the whole of Europe. It remains today a nostalgic cult classic. It's a time capsule of the 1980s, when Czechoslovak TV imagined a future both utopian and charmingly human.
Protože jsem mu tam zapomněl vrátit. Ale i tak jsme výborní. O 30 sekund lepší než posledně.
And this, my friends, is the end. Because when Czechoslovakia peacefully dissolved in 1993, the same thing happened to its national TV network. Czechoslovenská Televize, which had been broadcasting since 1953 and for 40 years had been the voice and the mouthpiece of the communist state, was dissolved. Its assets, archives and facilities were split between its 2 successor states, in Slovakia and the Czech Republic. And the shows are now accessible through national digital archives and retrospectives. So, in essence, CST didn't vanish. It was split into two heirs, each one continuing its mission in a new state, but both carrying the legacy of one of the most creative and tightly controlled television institutions in the Eastern Bloc. So, what are the main takeaways from this video? Well, firstly, I massively enjoyed this journey into Czechoslovak TV. Similar to when we went to Yugoslavia, there were so many iconic and unique programs I wanted to share with you. So much so that the first draft of this video was nearly an hour long. This video is just the tip of the iceberg of the rich history of Czechoslovak TV, and I highly recommend you go and watch some of these shows because they are awesome. Now, of course, the communist state controlled everything that was on TV. And this is seen pretty much throughout every single program, whether directly and obvious through the news or indirectly and discreet in dramas like The Woman Behind the Counter and Major Zeman. The state ensured that every program was sticking to and promoting the socialist ideal. But the incredible thing is, the talented individuals in Czechoslovakia didn't let this hamper their creative efforts. On the contrary, they managed to produce some of the most brilliantly unique and iconic programming in Europe. And so, in many ways, I guess Czechoslovakia hasn't really vanished, because it still exists and lives on in the epic archives of Czechoslovak TV. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also become a channel member to help support the channel. We'll see you next time.